I set myself a challenge to buy the best bike I could find under £150 to show you that you can get on the road on a tight budget, because somehow bikes are more expensive than cars these days.
This is ridiculous.
Spoiler alert, I just picked up this Specialized Allez Elite. Buying a cheap bike online can be an absolute goldmine or a total disaster. Now, I've bought a lot of bikes online over the years, so in this video, I'm breaking it all down so you can use this as a step-by-step guide and avoid making expensive mistakes and get yourself a bargain. So here's the plan. Our friend Dave wants to start cycling, but he doesn't want to buy a bike that has 3 zeros on the price tag. First, I'll show him how to spot the best deals and find cheap bikes online. Then we'll look at how to calculate a second-hand bike's true value so he's never overpaying. And finally, I'll walk him through a proper inspection process, step by step, using this £150 bike I just bought with my hard-earned cash as a real-world example. So how do we find a cheap second-hand bike? Let's say you're like our friend Dave and you don't want to remortgage your house to buy a bike. He's heard that buying second-hand can save him a ton of money, and he's also heard horror stories about dodgy sellers and bikes that look great in pictures but ride like a washing machine on cobblestones. Now, Dave doesn't want to get scammed. The first thing Dave does is look in the right places. The best place to find second-hand bikes for me are eBay and Facebook Marketplace. These two have the largest selection, and more importantly, eBay has a pricing history, so it helps us figure out what a bike is really worth. Now, buying second-hand is hands down the best way to get the best bike for your money. A £1,500 bike from a few years ago may be available for a fraction of the price second-hand. Now, once Dave finds a potential bike, he should check the listing carefully. The signs of a good bike is how well it's presented. If the bike looked like it's been ridden through the deep, dark depths of the English winter and stored outside, chances are it's not been well cared for. We want to see signs that the previous owner loved her dearly. Messaging the seller is also critical. This isn't just about asking questions, it's about figuring out if they actually know the bike and if the seller is legit. And we can start to build a picture of whether or not we actually trust them.
And I don't want to have my pants pulled down over the price.
So once Dave finds a promising listing from a trustworthy seller, he can then focus on the bike itself. Age is important, but not in the way people think. Older bikes actually can be better value. Frame material plays a big role in the performance and the price. The fork material matters too. Even if the frame is aluminium, carbon forks make a massive difference in comfort and ride quality. Components are where things get a little bit more complicated, but they also make a huge difference to the value. Let's talk about the most important factor when buying a bike. It's not the price, it's not the components, it's the size. Let me tell you a quick story. The first road bike that I ever bought was a Giant Defy Advanced 1. It was a size 54. I rode it for 3 years. Only after getting a proper bike fit did I understand why I had pain on longer rides and why I wasn't super comfy. I don't ride a small, I need a large bike. That mentality will have your sit bones glowing like a light bulb and your spine looking like a camel's back. If there's one thing to take away from this video, it's make sure you get the right size. I have a full bike fit video that covers all of this in depth. I'll leave a link to that video below. Do watch that before you buy it. Now, the best way to check a bike's value is by using eBay's sold listing feature. Now, by searching for a specific model like Giant Defy Advance, for example, and filtering by sold listings, we can see what people have actually paid previously. This helps us spot deals and avoid overpaying. It's important to compare apples to apples here. A size 52 might sell for 600 because it's a very common size, while a 58 might be a lot cheaper simply because there is less demand. So Dave has found the bike of his dreams and can't wait for his arse to grace the saddle, but is the bike actually worth buying? That's where we take a deep dive into my £150 Specialized Allez Elite as a real world example. Now, the foundations of the bike is the frame, the heart of the bike, so it needs a careful inspection. I always check the most stressed areas first, like the bottom bracket, the head tube, the seat tube. These areas take the most force when riding and are more likely to show damage. The frame on this bike looked great, no cracks or major dents or anything, just a few paint chips, which is normal for a bike of this age. Nothing like caressing another man's machine right before his eyes.
Is extremely intimate.
Dropouts are another crucial point to inspect because they bear a lot of stress where the wheels attach to the frame. On this bike, the front dropout had a bit of paint chipping, but structurally they were solid, no cracks or misalignment. On this bike, we have carbon forks. As we said, that's great, and they are in fantastic condition. We even have these specialized Zerts inserts, which are small sort of elastomer dampers designed to absorb road vibration. How fancy. Probably just a marketing gimmick. Now, one of the most common signs of wear on forks is tire rub or damage around the top of the fork. This is where the wheel throws dirt and grit up against it as it rotates. So Dave should get his eyes up close and personal in there and give it a good look over. This bike is pristine. It's starting to look like it may have never seen a drop of rain in its 19-year life. Now, before rolling away, a good set of wheels can sort of make or break a bike's performance. The first thing is branding. Branded wheels overall are a better choice as there's more info online for one. On this bike, I've got a set of Mavic CXP 22s. Mavic has been making wheels since the dawn of time, before I was actually born. We can ignore the fact that they went bankrupt a few years ago. These wheels were made way before then. Next up, bearings. A quick way to check is to spin the wheel and hold the frame or the fork. As the wheels spin, any sort of roughness or grinding or vibrations from the bearings will transfer through the bike and straight into your hands. You'll be able to feel it. Both the front and rear wheels on this bike have a little bit of roughness, but nothing excessive. You are also looking for any play in the bearings, any knocking sounds. Now, Dave wants the hub to feel like his hips did 15 years ago, smooth and great tolerances. There's a small chance I might be Dave. Let's check if the wheels spin true. So we can spin the wheel, and what's good to do here is sort of find a reference point. Now, I use the brake pad here as my reference point, and as you spin, if the rim sort of goes towards and then away from the brake pad, then it has a slight sort of buckle. You don't want it to look like a piece of spaghetti, basically. Now, both of these wheels looked pretty good. Now, because I'm excessive, I put them on the truing stand to get exact numbers. The front wheel has 0.34 millimeters of lateral deviation and the rear is 0.28. That's actually pretty decent compared to the modern carbon wheels I've reviewed. These did come in last, but you know, only by a fraction. For rim brake bikes, the brake track is another thing to check. Over time, brake pads wear down the brake track, sometimes making it sort of concave. If this happens, the wheel's lifespan is basically over. The rear wheel on this bike is perfect, barely any wear at all, which is honestly hard to believe. The front is the same, pristine brake track. It's like they've hardly been used. Attached to the wheels are the tyres, the bike's shoes, and they can transform how the bike feels. So take a closer look. A solid, well-known brand is definitely a safer bet. No random, no-name tyres, please. On this bike, we've got Continental GP 4000s, which is great to see. I've always used 4000s or the newer 5000s now, and they've never let me down. The wear indicators, the two small holes in the tread, they're basically full. It looks like there's no wear at all on these tyres. When tyres age, the rubber loses its sort of flexibility and starts to develop small cracks. That's a big red flag. For contrast, here are a set of GP 5000 tyres that I did 7,000 miles on. They had a hard life, and that is exactly what you don't want. If the bike is set up tubeless, another key question is when was the sealant last changed? Sealant doesn't last forever, and if the bike's sat, it can sort of solidify and dry up. Now, the headset might not be the flashiest component and easy to overlook. First, we check for play. The headset contains bearings. If they're loose, they will move around, they will wear down faster. I grab the front brake and rock the bike sort of back and forth and feel for any movements in the headset. Nothing here, it was rock solid. Next, I check for smooth rotation, so sort of lift the front end of the bike and gently turn the bars side to side and see if the movement is stiff or has any tight points. On this bike, they swing effortlessly. How a bike's gears perform is best tested under load, obviously, aka when your arse is in the saddle and you're hammering it down the road. Since we're doing stationary inspection, there are still plenty of things we can check. First, run the bike through all the gears, make sure it shifts smoothly and can reach both the highest and the lowest gears. All good with me, they're nice and crisp. Clean drivetrain really helps here as well, and obviously a good sign when you're buying a bike. Next, I check the front derailleur to make sure it smoothly moves the chain between the chain rings. Again, no issues here. Onto the cassette and chain rings, take a close look at the teeth. You want to get up close here. What we don't want is pointy teeth. That's a clear sign of excessive wear. Here, everything looks solid, they look pretty good, no shark fin teeth a present. To check the chain, it's best to have one of these tools. They're super cheap. You can just drop it in the chain. If it slides in completely, the chain is worn and needs replacing. If it doesn't, we're good to go. On this bike, the tool doesn't drop in, meaning the chain is in good shape. The bottom bracket is where all your power goes, so it's a crucial area to check. If there's any play here, the bearings will wear out quicker, leading to an inefficient and potentially creaky ride. To check for play, just grab the crank arms, try and move them side to side. No movement here, so good news. Changing the bottom bracket isn't the easiest thing to do, but if you're like Dave and you're quite mechanically minded, you can go and watch some of my full bike build videos and you can always swap it out yourself if there are any issues. Brakes should always be tested when riding as well.
Clever.
Stationary, I test for the lever pull. If the levers pull all the way to the handlebars, it could be a sign that the cables have stretched. On this bike, the front brake feels solid. The rear brake, however, has a deeper pull and I can pull it all the way to the handlebar. Not a deal breaker, but something to adjust later maybe. For rim brakes, you can check the pads. Here's what a new set of pads look like for reference. Looking at mine, they're in pretty good shape as well. The front pads are slightly more worn, but that makes sense because the front brake does the majority of the braking. For disc brakes, you can check the rotor condition, spin the wheel and make sure the rotor isn't warped as the wheel rotates or there's any deep grooves. The seat post might not be the first thing that you think to check, but trust me, you do not want a stuck seat post. The first thing you should do is see if the seat post moves freely. On this bike, it slides up and down with no problem perfectly. If it was stuck, I'd probably end up on Phil Vanderlei's YouTube channel. Now, once you are happy, hand over your hard-earned cash and ride off into the distance. And watch this video next where I look over a similar bike that I built, giving it a full service, fixing any issues. So it will show you how you can fix any issues with a bike you've just bought. I shall see you there.